Madison Carter had everything a 17-year-old girl could dream of. Her morning started with a ride to school in her father's black Mercedes, the leather seats still smelling brand new. She'd check her reflection in the tinted windows, making sure her $200 sneakers matched her designer bag perfectly. Life was good. Actually, life was perfect. Riverside Preparatory Academy wasn't just any school. It was the kind of place where parking lots looked like luxury car showrooms and students talked about their weekend trips to Paris like it was no big deal. Madison fit right in. Her father owned a tech company that was doing incredibly well, and everyone knew the Carter name. She had the best phone, the best clothes, and most importantly, the best spot at the cafeteria table where all the popular kids sat. That Tuesday morning felt like any other. Madison stepped out of the car, her new sneakers making that satisfying click against the pavement. She loved that sound. It meant expensive. It meant exclusive. She pulled out her phone to take a quick photo of her outfit. Her followers would love this look. "Hey, wait up," her best friend Ashley called out, jogging over in her own designer outfit. They'd been friends since middle school, though sometimes Madison wondered if Ashley actually liked her, or just liked being seen with her. Either way, it didn't really matter. They walked through the main entrance together, laughing about something silly from a TV show they both watched. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner, that sharp chemical scent that always meant the janitors had been working overnight. Madison barely noticed these things usually. The school was always clean, always perfect, and she never really thought about who made it that way. But today she noticed. Near the main hallway, an older man was mopping the floor. He must have been in his 60s, maybe older. His uniform was the standard blue that all the maintenance staff wore, but it looked faded like it had been washed 1,000 times. His face had deep lines around the eyes and mouth, the kind you get from years of hard work and probably not enough sleep. Madison probably wouldn't have paid him any attention at all, except for one thing. His shoes. Those work boots had definitely seen better days. The leather was scuffed and worn, with creases that spoke of miles walked and hours spent standing. But what really caught her eye was the sole on the right boot. It was coming apart, separating from the rest of the shoe, and someone had tried to fix it with what looked like duct tape. Gray duct tape wrapped around the sole, holding it together. Madison stopped walking. She actually stopped and stared. Her friends noticed and stopped too. "Oh my God," Madison said, loud enough that her voice echoed slightly in the hallway. "Did you guys see those shoes?" Ashley looked over and made a face. They're literally falling apart." Madison felt a laugh bubble up from her chest. "I wouldn't even donate those to charity. Like they'd probably throw them away." She raised her voice a bit more, making sure she was heard. "Who even walks around in shoes held together with tape?" Her other friends giggled. One of them, Brittany, pulled out her phone like she was about to take a picture, but Madison grabbed her arm. "Don't be that obvious," she whispered, though she was still smiling. The janitor looked up for just a second. His eyes met Madison's, and for a brief moment she saw something in his expression. Not anger, not embarrassment, just a calm, quiet look that she couldn't quite read. Then he went back to mopping, his movements steady and unhurried. Madison felt a tiny flutter in her stomach. Was it guilt? No, couldn't be. She pushed the feeling away and kept walking, her expensive sneakers clicking confidently down the hallway. By the time she reached her locker, she'd already forgotten about the man and his taped-up boots. The rest of the day was completely normal. She aced her English test without really studying, ate lunch with her friends at their usual table, and spent her free period scrolling through social media. Someone had posted a photo from a yacht party they went to over the weekend, and Madison felt a small stab of jealousy. Her family had a boat, but not a yacht. Not yet, anyway. Her dad kept talking about buying one. After school, she waited by the front entrance for her dad to pick her up. Some students took the bus, but Madison had never even been on a public bus in her life. Why would she need to? Her dad's car was right there, pulling up to the curb, always on time. "How was school, sweetheart?" her father asked as she climbed in. "Same as always," Madison said, buckling her seatbelt. "Boring." Her father laughed. "You know, when I was your age, I would have killed to go to a school like Riverside. I went to public school in a rough neighborhood. We didn't have half the opportunities you have." Madison had heard this story before. Her dad grew up poor, worked his way through college, started his company from nothing and built it into something successful. It was an inspiring story, she guessed, but it felt so distant from her own life. She couldn't really imagine not having money, not having nice things. "I know, Dad," she said, looking out the window as they drove through the city. You worked really hard, and she meant it. She was proud of her father. She just didn't think about it very much. Why would she? Her life was easy, comfortable, and exactly the way she liked it. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, everything she took for granted would start crumbling around her. She had no idea that the man with the taped-up boots would end up changing her entire life. But that's the thing about life. It can turn upside down in a heartbeat. One day you're on top of the world mocking someone's old shoes. The next day, you're learning what it really means to walk in them. Madison was in her room that evening trying on different outfits for the next day when she heard her father's voice downstairs. He was talking on the phone and his tone was different, sharp, stressed. She turned down her music and moved closer to her door. I don't care what they're saying, her father said, his voice rising. I had nothing to do with those transactions. That was all Peterson. He made those decisions without consulting me. Madison felt her heart start to beat faster. Something was wrong. Her father never sounded like this. He was always calm, always in control, always the confident businessman who had answers for everything. She crept downstairs quietly, staying on the carpeted parts of the steps so they wouldn't creak. Her mother was in the kitchen, sitting at the island with her head in her hands. That wasn't normal either. Her mother was usually busy planning something, organizing something, always in motion. Dad? Madison said softly as she reached the bottom of the stairs. Her father turned around quickly, his phone still pressed to his ear. His face looked tired in a way she'd never seen before. There were dark circles under his eyes and his tie was loosened. I'll call you back, he said into the phone and hung up. What's going on? Madison asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Her father sat down heavily on the couch and rubbed his face with both hands. Her mother got up from the kitchen and came to sit beside him. Madison stood there in her doorway, suddenly feeling like a little kid again. Sweetheart, we need to talk, her father began. Something's happened with the company. The SEC, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, they're investigating some financial irregularities. Madison didn't really know what that meant, but it sounded bad. What kind of irregularities? My business partner, Charles Peterson, he's been making some decisions that weren't exactly legal, her father explained. His voice was steady, but Madison could hear the shake underneath it. He was moving money around, hiding losses, inflating profits. And because I'm the CEO, because my name is on everything, they're coming after me too. But you didn't do anything wrong, right? Madison asked. You can just tell them it was all him. Her father gave her a sad smile. It's not that simple. In business, when you're in charge, you're responsible for everything that happens under your watch. Even if I didn't know what he was doing, I should have known. That's what they'll say. Madison felt like the floor was tilting under her feet. So what does that mean? What's going to happen? Her mother spoke up for the first time. They've frozen our accounts, honey. The government has taken control of our money while they investigate. We can't access most of it. But we have other money, right? Madison said. Like savings and stuff? Her father shook his head. Everything is tied up in the company. The house, the cars, the accounts, everything. We have about $3,000 in your mother's personal account that they haven't frozen yet. That's it. $3,000. Madison spent that much on shopping in a single month. How were they supposed to live on $3,000? The next few days were a complete nightmare. Madison watched as her entire life was packed into boxes. The bank was taking the penthouse. They had 2 weeks to move out. Her father's lawyers were working around the clock, but they weren't optimistic. Even if her father wasn't criminally charged, which was still a possibility, the civil penalties would wipe them out financially. Madison's mother found a small apartment across town. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen so tiny you could barely turn around in it. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't nice either. Madison stood in the empty apartment and tried not to cry. Her bedroom in the penthouse had been bigger than this entire place. We're lucky we can finish the semester at Riverside, her father said, trying to sound positive. Your tuition was already paid for the full year. After that, we'll figure something out. Lucky. Madison didn't feel lucky. She felt like her entire world was ending. Going back to school was torture. At first, her friends were sympathetic. Ashley hugged her and said everything would be okay. Brittany brought her a coffee and told her not to worry. But Madison could see the looks they exchanged when they thought she wasn't watching. She could hear the whispers in the hallways. By the end of the first week, things had changed. Ashley started sitting with other people at lunch, claiming she had a group project to work on. Brittany stopped texting back. The other girls in her friend group suddenly had plans every weekend that somehow didn't include her anymore. Madison found herself eating lunch alone in the library, pretending to study. She'd never realized how much of her popularity was about what she had, not who she was. The expensive clothes, the luxury car, the penthouse parties. Without those things, she was just another student. Invisible. The second week was even worse. Her phone got disconnected. Her parents couldn't afford the family plan anymore, and a cell phone wasn't a necessity, her mother said. Madison felt completely cut off from the world. She couldn't check social media, couldn't text her friends, couldn't even look up homework assignments online. Then her laptop got repossessed. Apparently, her father had leased it through the company, and when the company went under, everything got taken back. Madison had to use the school library computers for her homework, waiting in line with students she'd never really noticed before. Her clothes were another problem. She only had what she'd managed to pack before they moved, and she was wearing the same outfits over and over. She watched other girls show up in new clothes every week and felt a burning shame in her chest. She'd been one of those girls just a month ago. The worst part was the cafeteria. Madison had always bought lunch, never thinking twice about the cost. But now her parents gave her $10 a week for food, and that had to cover everything. She started skipping lunch, claiming she wasn't hungry, trying to save the money for emergencies. One day in the hallway, she overheard two girls from her old friend group talking about her. "I can't believe she's wearing the same jeans again," one of them said. "Doesn't she have anything else?" "My mom said her dad's probably going to jail," the other one replied. "For fraud or something? How embarrassing." Madison pressed herself against the lockers, waiting for them to pass. Her face burned with humiliation. These were girls she'd had sleepovers with, girls she'd shared secrets with. Now they talked about her like she was nothing. She started taking different routes through the school, avoiding places where she might run into her old friends. She kept her head down, trying to be invisible. For the first time in her life, Madison understood what it felt like to be judged, to be dismissed, to be treated like you didn't matter. And the terrible thing was, she'd done the same thing to other people her entire life. She'd looked down on kids who wore cheap clothes or brought lunch from home. She'd made fun of people who couldn't afford the latest phone or the newest sneakers. She'd been exactly like the girls who were now treating her the same way. The realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. She'd been cruel. Not just to that janitor with the taped-up boots, but to so many people. And she'd never even thought twice about it because she'd never imagined herself in their position. But now she was. And it hurt worse than anything she'd ever felt before. 3 weeks had passed since Madison's world fell apart, and she was sitting on the front steps of Riverside Prep on a Thursday afternoon, trying hard not to cry. Her mother was supposed to pick her up 30 minutes ago, but she'd sent a message through the school office saying the car had broken down again. She was taking the bus from her new job at a call center downtown, but it would be another hour at least. Madison hugged her backpack to her chest and stared at the parking lot. She watched student after student get picked up by parents in nice cars. Some of them drove their own cars. Expensive graduation gifts. She'd been promised a car for her 18th birthday just a few months away. That wasn't happening now. Her stomach growled loudly. She'd skipped lunch again, trying to save her food money. Her parents were doing their best, but everything was tight. Her mother had taken the call center job, working nights and weekends. Her father was doing freelance consulting, whatever work he could find while he dealt with lawyers and investigations. Madison had wanted to get a job too, but her mother said her job was to focus on school and keep her grades up. They'd figure out the rest. But sitting there hungry and alone, waiting for a mother who was taking public transportation for the first time in 20 years, Madison felt completely hopeless. How had everything changed so fast? How had her entire life just disappeared? "You okay there, miss?" Madison looked up, wiping quickly at her eyes. It was the janitor, the one with the taped-up boots. He was pushing his cleaning cart, probably heading home after his shift. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty courtyard. "I'm fine," Madison said automatically, but her voice cracked on the last word. More tears spilled over and she couldn't stop them. The janitor hesitated for a moment, then parked his cart and sat down on the steps, leaving a respectful distance between them. Up close, Madison could see his face more clearly. He had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that had seen a lot but somehow stayed gentle. His hands were weathered and scarred, the hands of someone who'd worked hard their entire life. Sometimes fine is just the word we use. When we don't want to explain how not fine we actually are, he said quietly. Madison let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Yeah, something like that. They sat in silence for a minute. Madison expected him to leave, to get uncomfortable and make an excuse. That's what everyone else did. But he just sat there, patient and calm, like he had all the time in the world. Life has a way of teaching us lessons we don't want to learn, he finally said. I know a little something about that. Madison looked over at him. She thought about that day in the hallway, the terrible things she'd said about his shoes. Shame washed over her so strongly she felt sick. I'm sorry, she blurted out. About what I said. About your boots. That was really cruel, and I'm so sorry. The janitor looked down at his feet and smiled slightly. These old things? They've got a story, but I suspect you've got one too now. Something about the way he said it, so understanding and without any judgment, broke down the wall Madison had been building around herself. She started talking. She told him everything. About her father's company, the investigation, losing their home, her mother working at a call center, her friends abandoning her, wearing the same clothes over and over, skipping meals because they couldn't afford food. The words just poured out of her, and he listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer hollow advice, didn't tell her it could be worse. He just nodded occasionally, his expression sympathetic. The worst part is, Madison said, her voice getting quiet, I'm finally understanding what I did to other people. All those times I made fun of someone's clothes or their phone or whatever. All those times I acted like I was better than everyone else just because I had money. I was awful. And now I'm getting exactly what I deserve. Now hold on, the janitor said, his voice firm but kind. You're not getting punished. Life isn't a karma machine that pays back every wrong deed. You're just experiencing what a lot of people experience every single day. And yeah, maybe it's teaching you empathy. Maybe it's showing you that people's worth has nothing to do with their bank account. But that doesn't mean you deserve to suffer. Madison wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I just don't know how to do this. How to be the poor kid. How to be invisible. You're not invisible, he said. You're just seeing yourself differently because you're being treated differently. But the girl you were before all this, she wasn't better. And the girl you are now isn't worse. You're just learning. That's all any of us can do. They sat quietly for another moment. Madison's stomach growled again, even louder this time. She felt her face turn red with embarrassment. The janitor reached into his pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. It was worn soft with age, the edges frayed. There's a diner about 2 blocks down that way, he said, pointing. Maria's place. They make a great sandwich and the coffee's not bad either. Why don't you go get yourself something to eat while you wait for your mom? He held out a $20 bill. Madison stared at it. I can't take your money. Sure you can, he said. Consider it a loan. You can pay me back someday when you're back on your feet. Or better yet, when you see someone else who needs help, you can pay it forward to them. But you don't even know me, Madison said. Her eyes were filling with tears again. After what I said to you, after how I treated you, why would you help me? The janitor smiled, and it reached all the way to his eyes. Because a long time ago someone helped me when I needed it. Someone saw past my circumstances and treated me like I mattered. It changed my whole life. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. Madison took the 20 with shaking hands. It felt like so much more than money. It felt like kindness she didn't deserve but desperately needed. Thank you, she whispered. Really, thank you so much. Go on now, he said, standing up and brushing off his uniform. Get some food in you. Things always look a little better when you're not hungry. Madison watched him walk away, pushing his cleaning cart, those taped-up boots scuffing against the pavement. She looked down at the $20 bill in her hand. It was probably money he couldn't really afford to give away. Janitors didn't make much, she knew that now. He was probably working paycheck to paycheck, just like her parents were now, and yet he'd given it to her without hesitation, without making her feel small or pitiful, without asking for anything in return. She walked to Maria's place, a little diner she'd passed 100 times but never thought to enter. It was the kind of place her old self would have turned her nose up at, but right now it looked warm and welcoming. She ordered a sandwich and a coffee and sat at the counter, eating slowly, making it last. The food tasted better than anything she'd eaten in weeks. Not because it was fancy or expensive, but because someone had cared enough to make sure she didn't go hungry. A stranger had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than her so-called friends had shown her in 3 weeks. When her mother finally arrived, apologizing profusely for being late, Madison hugged her tight. "It's okay, Mom. I'm okay." And for the first time since everything fell apart, she actually meant it. She wasn't okay in the way she used to define it, with money and status and all the right things, but she was okay in a different way. She was learning. She was changing. She was beginning to understand what really mattered. That night, lying in her tiny bedroom in their small apartment, Madison thought about the janitor with the taped-up boots. She thought about his kindness, his wisdom, the way he'd treated her with dignity when she had nothing to offer him in return. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story, not really. But she knew she wanted to be more like him. She wanted to be the kind of person who saw people, really saw them, no matter what they wore or what they had. She had no idea that tomorrow, she'd learn exactly who that janitor was, and that knowledge would change everything. Friday morning started like any other day. Madison walked to school now because they couldn't afford the gas for her mother to drive her both ways. It was about a 20-minute walk, and she'd gotten used to it. She actually kind of liked it. The quiet time to think, watching the neighborhood wake up around her. When she got to school, though, something felt different. There was a buzz in the hallways. Students clustered in groups talking excitedly. Madison grabbed her books from her locker and tried to tune it out. She'd learned that most of the time the gossip had nothing to do with her, and it was better not to know. "Did you hear about the assembly?" A girl next to her said to her friend. "Yeah, supposedly it's some big announcement. They're canceling second period for it." Madison's stomach dropped. Assemblies usually meant bad news for someone. She couldn't imagine what else could go wrong in her life, but she'd learned not to assume anything. First period dragged by. Her history teacher droned on about the Revolutionary War, but Madison couldn't focus. She kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes tick by. Finally, the announcement came over the speaker system. "All students, please report to the auditorium for a special assembly. Teachers, please escort your classes." The auditorium was packed by the time Madison found a seat near the back. She preferred the back now, away from the eyes and whispers. The principal, Mrs. Davidson, was standing on the stage looking excited about something. Next to her was a table with what looked like folders or certificates. Madison couldn't quite tell. "Good morning. Riverside students," Mrs. Davidson said into the microphone, waiting for the chatter to die down. "I know you're all wondering why we've called this special assembly. Well, we have a very special guest with us today, and an even more special announcement." The lights dimmed slightly and a presentation screen lowered behind her. Madison leaned back in her seat, only half paying attention. "Many of you have seen this person in our hallways," Mrs. Davidson continued. "You've probably passed him dozens of times without really seeing him. But today I want to introduce you to someone remarkable. Please welcome Dr. Henry Walsh." The side door opened and Madison's heart nearly stopped. Walking onto the stage, wearing a simple but nice suit instead of his janitor's uniform, was the man with the taped-up boots. The man who'd sat with her on the steps. The man who'd given her $20 for food. The auditorium erupted in confused whispers. Madison heard someone behind her say, "Wait, isn't that the janitor?" Mrs. Davidson smiled at the crowd's reaction. "Yes, many of you know Mr. Walsh, or I should say Dr. Walsh, as part of our maintenance staff. But what you don't know is his incredible story." A photo appeared on the screen behind them. It showed a much younger version of the janitor in a graduation cap and gown, standing in front of a sign that read, "Harvard University." "Dr. Henry Walsh holds a doctorate in education from Harvard," Mrs. Davidson continued. "He spent 30 years as a professor and educational administrator at various institutions across the country. He's written 3 books on education reform and student success." Madison felt like she couldn't breathe. The janitor was a professor? From Harvard? Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of this. "But Dr. Walsh didn't come to Riverside to teach in the traditional sense," Mrs. Davidson said. 5 years ago, after retiring from his position as Dean of Education at a prestigious university, he created something called the Invisible Scholars Foundation. Another image appeared on the screen. A logo for the foundation with numbers beneath it. $10 million in scholarships awarded. 500 students helped. 12 states reached. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Everyone was leaning forward, trying to understand what they were hearing. The Invisible Scholars Foundation was created to help students who are often overlooked, Mrs. Davidson explained. Not necessarily the students with the highest grades or the most impressive resumes, but the students who show potential for real growth, real change, and real character development. She turned to Dr. Walsh, who stepped up to the microphone. He looked different in a suit, but his eyes were the same. Kind, knowing, patient. A year ago, Dr. Walsh began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. I approached the school board with an unusual request. I wanted to work at Riverside as a janitor, not because I needed the job, but because I wanted to see students in their natural environment. I wanted to understand who you really are when you think nobody important is watching. Madison felt her face burning. She remembered that day in the hallway, the cruel comments about his shoes. He'd heard everything. Of course he had. I've spent this year observing, Dr. Walsh continued, watching how you treat each other, watching how you handle success and failure, watching who you are when you think it doesn't matter. And I've learned more about students in this 1 year than I learned in 30 years of traditional education. He paused, letting that sink in. Today I'm here to announce this year's scholarship recipients. 5 students from Riverside Preparatory will each receive a $50,000 scholarship to the college of their choice. The auditorium erupted in excited chatter. $50,000. That was life-changing money. Madison felt happy for whoever would receive it, but also a deep sadness. She knew she had no chance. Not after how she'd treated him. Dr. Walsh began calling names. The first student was a girl named Patricia, who'd apparently been volunteering at a homeless shelter. The second was a boy who'd overcome a learning disability to maintain honor roll. The third was a student who'd started a recycling program. Each one walked to the stage to receive their award while the auditorium applauded. Madison clapped along, trying to feel happy for them while her heart felt heavy. She'd had everything a year ago, and she'd wasted it being cruel and shallow. These students deserved the recognition. She deserved nothing. The fourth recipient, Dr. Walsh said, and Madison prepared to clap again, is someone who's taught me perhaps the most important lesson about character. Something in his tone made Madison pay attention. This student started the year as someone I might not have noticed. Dr. Walsh continued, someone who had all the advantages, all the confidence, all the social currency that comes with wealth and status. And yes, this student said some unkind things, made some poor choices, judged people by their appearances. Madison felt like everyone in the auditorium was looking at her, though she knew that was probably her imagination. But then life changed for this student, Dr. Walsh said. Circumstances beyond her control took away everything she'd relied on. Her wealth, her status, her friends, her security. And I watched what happened next. I watched her struggle. I watched her hurt. But more importantly, I watched her grow. Madison's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I've watched her volunteer to tutor younger students even while dealing with her own hardships. I've watched her stand up for a student being bullied in the hallway, the same kind of bullying she once participated in herself. I've watched her learn empathy, humility, and resilience. And that kind of growth, that kind of transformation is worth recognizing and supporting. He looked out into the audience and his eyes found hers. Madison Carter, would you please come to the stage? The auditorium went completely silent. Madison sat frozen in her seat. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Madison, Dr. Walsh repeated gently. Come on up. On shaking legs, Madison stood. Students turned to watch her walk down the aisle. She could see the shock on their faces, the confusion, maybe some resentment. She barely noticed. All she could see was Dr. Walsh standing on that stage, smiling at her with those kind eyes. She climbed the steps, her legs feeling like they might give out. Dr. Walsh met her halfway and handed her a folder. Inside was the scholarship certificate, $50,000, for college, for her future, for a second chance. But I don't understand, Madison whispered, tears streaming down her face. After what I said to you, after how I treated you. Dr. Walsh spoke quietly, so only she could hear. You learned. You changed. You became someone who understands that a person's worth has nothing to do with their shoes or their bank account. That's more valuable than anything money can buy. The auditorium was applauding now, though Madison barely heard it. She was crying too hard, holding the folder to her chest like it might disappear if she let go. After the assembly ended, after the 5th scholarship was awarded, after the principal made her closing remarks, Madison waited by the stage. She had to talk to him. Had to understand. "Why me?" she asked when the crowd had thinned. "Really? Why?" Dr. Walsh smiled and looked down at his boots, the same taped-up ones he'd worn as a janitor. 35 years ago, I was homeless, he said simply. Living in shelters, wearing donated clothes, eating at soup kitchens. I had nothing and I was nobody. A teacher at an adult education center saw me anyway, saw past the circumstances to the person underneath. She helped me get my life together, helped me go to college, believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. He looked back up at Madison. She changed my entire life with one act of kindness. I wear these boots to remember where I came from, to remember what it feels like to be judged by appearances. And I created the foundation to do for others what she did for me. To see people really see them and help them become who they're meant to be. Madison understood then. He hadn't given her the scholarship in spite of her past behavior. He'd given it to her because of who she was becoming, because he saw her potential, her growth, her transformation. Because he believed in second chances. Madison stood in the hallway after the assembly, clutching the scholarship folder to her chest, still trying to process everything that had just happened. Students streamed past her, some offering congratulations, others giving her curious looks. She barely noticed any of it. Her mind was spinning with the impossible reality that the janitor she'd mocked was actually a Harvard professor who'd just given her $50,000 for college. "Madison?" She turned to see Ashley standing there, looking uncomfortable. Her former best friend shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly struggling with what to say. "That's really great," Ashley said finally. "About the scholarship. I'm happy for you." Madison waited, sensing there was more. "Look, I'm sorry," Ashley continued, her voice quieter now, "about how I've been treating you these past few weeks. It was wrong. I was a terrible friend." Madison could have accepted the apology and moved on, but something had changed in her. She'd learned too much to let this moment pass without honesty. "You were a terrible friend," Madison agreed, watching Ashley's eyes widen in surprise. "But I was a terrible friend too, long before any of this happened. I was only friends with people who made me look good. I only cared about people who could do something for me. And I treated anyone I thought was beneath me like they didn't matter." Ashley looked down at her expensive shoes. "We were both wrong," Madison said more gently. "And maybe we needed to lose each other to figure that out." She walked away, leaving Ashley standing in the hallway. It felt strange to speak that plainly, to not smooth things over with polite excuses. But it also felt right. Honest. Real. That afternoon, Madison walked home with the scholarship folder carefully tucked in her backpack. When she got to their small apartment, her mother was already home from her morning shift at the call center, sitting at the tiny kitchen table with bills spread out in front of her. Her father was in the corner on his laptop, probably sending out more resumes or responding to lawyers. "Mom. Dad." "Something happened today," Madison said. They both looked up, and she saw the flash of worry in their eyes. They'd gotten used to bad news. "Something good," she added quickly. "Really good." She pulled out the scholarship certificate and watched their faces transform. Her mother started crying immediately, covering her mouth with both hands. Her father stood up so fast he knocked his chair over, grabbing Madison in a tight hug. "I can't believe it," her mother kept saying. $50,000, how is this even possible?" Madison told them the whole story, about the janitor with the taped-up boots, about the cruel comment she'd made, about him sitting with her on the steps and giving her money for food, about finding out he was actually Dr. Henry Walsh from Harvard with a foundation dedicated to helping students. "He saw something in me I didn't see in myself," Madison said. "He saw that I could change, that I could be better." Her father shook his head in amazement. "That man is extraordinary. We need to thank him properly." He doesn't want thanks, Madison said, thinking about their conversation after the assembly. He wants me to pay it forward, to help someone else the way he helped me. That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She lay, in her narrow bed in her tiny room, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. She'd lost so much. Her home, her money, her friends, her status. But somehow, in losing all of that, she'd gained something more valuable. She'd gained perspective, understanding, empathy. She'd learned what really mattered. The scholarship didn't solve all her family's problems. Her father was still facing legal troubles, though his lawyers were starting to build a case that he'd been genuinely unaware of his partner's illegal activities. They still lived in that small apartment. Her mother still worked at the call center. But the scholarship meant Madison could go to college, could build a future, could make something of herself. More importantly, it meant someone believed in her. Someone had seen her at her worst and still thought she was worth investing in. The next Monday, Madison started making changes. She approached the school counselor about starting a peer mentoring program, pairing students from wealthy families with scholarship students. The counselor loved the idea and helped her set it up. "I want to help people understand each other better," Madison explained. "Rich kids don't understand what it's like to struggle financially. Scholarship kids sometimes feel invisible. If we can bring them together, maybe both sides learn something." She also got a part-time job at Maria's place, the diner where Dr. Walsh had sent her for food. The owner, an older woman named Rosa, was hesitant at first. Madison had no experience. But when Madison explained why she wanted to work there specifically, Rosa smiled and gave her a chance. "Dr. Walsh sends me students sometimes," Rosa said. "Students who need a meal, a kind word, or a job. I always try to help when I can." Madison worked weekends and 2 evenings a week, learning to wait tables, to make coffee, to talk to the regular customers. She saved every dollar of her tips in a jar she labeled, "Pay it forward." When the jar got full, she used it to buy lunch for students she saw sitting alone in the cafeteria, or to leave anonymous gift cards at the guidance office for students who needed them. She started noticing people in a way she never had before. The quiet girl who always wore the same 3 outfits. The boy who packed his own lunch in containers from home. The student who stayed after school because his house wasn't a safe place to be. Madison had passed these people 100 times before and never really seen them. Now she couldn't stop seeing them. One day, about 3 months after the assembly, Madison was mopping up a spill at the diner when she looked down at her shoes. They were cheap sneakers from a discount store, already showing wear. Nothing like the designer shoes she used to own. She thought about Dr. Walsh and his taped-up boots, worn by choice to remember where he came from. These shoes told a story too. They told the story of who she was becoming. The months passed. Madison kept her grades up, kept working at the diner, kept running the mentoring program. Her father's legal situation slowly improved. The investigators determined he'd genuinely been unaware of his partner's crimes. He wouldn't face criminal charges, though the civil penalties had still wiped out the company and their savings. "We're starting over," her father told her one evening. "From the ground up. But you know what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I got so caught up in success that I forgot what really mattered. My family, my integrity, being a good person." Madison hugged him tight. "We're going to be okay, Dad. Different than before, but okay." As graduation approached, Madison applied to colleges with her scholarship. She chose to study social work, wanting to help people who were struggling the way her family had struggled. She got accepted to several schools and chose a state university with a strong program. Dr. Walsh came to her graduation. She saw him in the audience, sitting with her parents. He was wearing a nice suit, but she noticed he still had on those same taped-up boots. She caught his eye and smiled, and he nodded back with that gentle, knowing expression. After the ceremony, Madison found him in the crowd. "You came," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," Dr. Walsh replied. "I like to see how my students turn out." "I wanted to give you something," Madison said, pulling an envelope from her purse. Inside was a check for $20. "I'm paying back the loan." "With interest," she smiled. "Though the real interest is all the people I've been able to help because you helped me." Dr. Walsh took the envelope but didn't open it. "Tell me about them," he said. So Madison did. She told him about the mentoring program that now had 40 students participating, about the lonely kids she'd bought lunch for at the diner, about the scholarship fund she'd started with her tip money, still small but growing, to help students in emergency situations. "There was this girl, Amy," Madison said. "She reminded me of myself. Rich family, popular, kinda mean. Her parents lost everything in a stock market crash. She was devastated, lost, angry. I sat with her after school one day and told her my story. About you, about the boots, about learning what really matters. She cried for an hour, but then she started coming to the mentoring meetings, started volunteering, started changing." Dr. Walsh's eyes were shining. "That's the ripple effect," he said. "One person helps another, who helps another, who helps another. It spreads outward, touching more lives than we can possibly know." "I can never repay you for what you did for me," Madison said. "You're not supposed to repay me," Dr. Walsh said gently. "You're supposed to pay it forward. And from what you've just told me, you're doing exactly that." 5 years later, Madison walked across another stage to receive her college diploma. Her parents were there, beaming with pride. They'd rebuilt their lives slowly and carefully. Her father had started a small consulting business based on honesty and ethical practices. Her mother had gotten promoted to supervisor at the call center. They'd never gotten back the penthouse or the luxury cars, but they had something better. They had integrity. They had each other. They had purpose. Dr. Walsh was there too, now in his 70s but still sharp and engaged. He'd officially retired from his foundation, but he still wore those boots. When Madison asked him why he never replaced them, he just smiled. "These boots remind me that I'm no different from anyone else," he'd said. "That I'm no better than the person struggling, the person failing, the person everyone else overlooks. We're all just human beings trying to figure out how to live good lives." Madison started her first job the following week, as a social worker at a community center in a low-income neighborhood. Her desk was small, her office shared, her salary barely enough to cover rent and student loans. But every day she got to help people. She got to listen to their stories, understand their struggles, and help them find resources and hope. She kept a photo on her desk. It was from graduation day, showing her standing between Dr. Walsh and her parents. In the photo, you could just see Dr. Walsh's boots, taped and worn and perfect. Underneath the photo, she'd written a quote that Dr. Walsh had shared with her once. "The true measure of a person is not what they do when everyone is watching, but what they do when they think no one is looking." Madison thought about that every single day. She thought about the girl she'd been, cruel and judgmental and shallow. She thought about the moment that changed everything, when life humbled her and taught her what really mattered. She thought about Dr. Walsh, who'd seen potential in her when she couldn't see it in herself. But mostly she thought about all the people she could help now. All the lives she could touch. All the ripples she could create, spreading outward in ways she'd never fully know. One afternoon, Madison was leaving the community center when she saw a teenage girl sitting on the steps outside, crying. The girl wore expensive clothes but looked lost and scared. Madison recognized that look. She'd worn it herself once. "Hey," Madison said gently, sitting down beside her. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, embarrassed to be caught crying. "I'm fine. Just waiting for my mom." "You know," Madison said, "sometimes fine is just the word we use when we don't want to explain how not fine we actually are." The girl let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, something like that." Madison stayed there on the steps listening as the girl poured out her story. Parents divorcing, moving to a smaller place, friends abandoning her, feeling like her whole world was ending. It was a different story than Madison's, but the pain was the same. The fear was the same. The desperate need for someone to understand was the same. When the girl finished talking, Madison reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. "There's a diner 2 blocks down called Maria's Place. Go get yourself something to eat. You'll feel better with some food in you." The girl stared at the money. "I can't take that." "Sure you can," Madison said, echoing words spoken to her years ago. "Consider it a loan. Pay it forward when you can." The girl took the money with shaking hands. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Madison smiled, thinking about taped-up boots and impossible kindness and the way one moment of compassion can change everything. Because someone once helped me when I needed it, she said simply. Someone saw past my circumstances and treated me like I mattered. It changed my whole life. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. She watched the girl walk toward the diner and she thought about Dr. Walsh. About how he'd worked as a janitor for a year, just to understand students better. About how he'd shown her grace when she deserved judgment. About how he'd believed in her transformation when everyone else had given up on her. The greatest lessons aren't taught in classrooms. They're taught in moments of humility, in acts of unexpected kindness, in the realization that we're all human beings equally worthy of dignity and respect. Madison had mocked a janitor's shoes and discovered a teacher. She'd lost everything and found herself. She'd been broken down and built back up into someone better, someone kinder, someone who understood what truly mattered. And now, standing outside a community center in a modest neighborhood, wearing practical shoes and carrying a worn backpack, Madison understood that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because of what she had, but because of who she'd become. The ripples kept spreading. One person helped another, who helped another, who helped another. Acts of kindness multiplying outward, touching lives in ways no one could fully measure or predict. And somewhere, Madison knew Dr. Walsh was still walking around in those taped-up boots, still seeing people that others overlooked, still believing that everyone deserves a second chance. That's what she carried with her every single day, not the scholarship money, though it had made college possible. Not the praise or recognition, though it had meant a lot, but the simple, powerful truth that one moment of kindness can change two lives. The person who receives it and the person who gives it. Both transformed, both better, both part of something bigger than themselves. That was Dr. Walsh's real gift. Not the money, not the opportunity, but the understanding that we're all connected, that our actions matter, that how we treat the people around us defines who we really are. Madison smiled to herself and headed home, already thinking about who she might help tomorrow, whose story she might listen to, whose life she might touch with a small act of compassion, because that's what it was all about. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but simple human kindness extended from one person to another. One moment at a time. One choice at a time. One person at a time. That's how the world changes. That's how lives change. That's how we become the people we're meant to be.